Welcome to Leapcast. I'm your host, Dr. George James. Leap stands for leaders, entertainers, athletes, and performers. And I'm on a journey to connect with high achievers and highlight their unexamined human moments. Tune in to learn how these high-achieving Leap individuals were able to reach their greatest potential, face their most difficult challenges, and embrace the human moments that helped them along the way. If you want to get the episode highlights directly in your email, then head to theleapcast.com right now to subscribe. So I want to start off by just talking about a little bit about the organization that I've been a part of for the past 18 years, which is Counsel for Relationships. And Counsel for Relationships has been around. I meant to get the exact number, but I think we're approaching our 90th birthday. And an organization that has specialized in really helping people with their mental health needs, mental health services for almost a century now. And not only have we helped people, in particular, we have been able to focus and specialize with individuals, couples, and families. We have a pretty strong expertise around couples and family and systemic work. And we've also been able to train folks who want to become therapists or to grow in their ability as therapists over the years. That's one of the foundations of what we do. So we not only do the clinical work, but we also train those who want to be clinicians. We have a postmaster's program, graduate program, and also a graduate master's degree program. That is affiliated with Thomas Jefferson, the master's degree program. So that's a little bit about us. And like I said, I've been there 18 years. The person that we have a connection through, Dr. B. Hollander Gofine, was actually been around probably a little bit more than that. I know a little bit more than that, probably around 30 years. B, you can let us know in the chat. 35, maybe going close to 40 years. One of the reasons why I've loved the organization is that people have been committed and have been here serving for a long time. But let me tell you how we got to this point. Our organization, like I said, it's been around for a while, and we've done great work to help people, not only those who come in our office, but also those in the community. But we also recognize, especially last year after the murder of George Floyd and all the injustice that people became more aware of racial injustice, we saw that we needed to continue to take a deeper look at ourselves as an organization. What are we doing? What are we not doing? And that set us on a path, a deeper path, to not only think about how do we help those who come in our office, but also how do we look at ourselves, our own biases, our own struggles, the things that we could do better. And so that included from what statements that we put out, and to put statements out, because at one point we didn't, to be clear and intentional about what we stand for, what is our mission. That also led us to doing book groups and having conversations, sometimes challenging conversations, about how do we think about our work, race, identity, and all the intersections that there is. So I just wanted to give you that overview of who we are and what we've been able to do, and before we kind of get forward into the conversation. So what I want to start off with is just really getting the chance you've done so many great things, and I'm just inspired by your career and how you've been able to touch so many lives. But one of the things that I call is this thing called Leap Story. We have a division called Leap, which stands for leaders, entertainers, athletes, and performers, where we try to provide mental health services for those individuals who fit in those categories. So we have this thing called Leap Story, which is about learning more about your journey. In particular, how did you or when did you recognize that you wanted to be a writer, musician? How did you evolve there? So if you could just tell us a little bit about you and your story. I know there's a lot to it, and we'll get more into it. But just to start off, I'd love to hear more about your story.
At this point in my life, I mean, I haven't separated my life into various stages of what I've done and what I haven't done it. At a certain point in my life, I just decided to do what I like to do,
Yeah.
and sometimes that meant taking jobs in things I didn't like to take jobs in order to do the things that I liked to do or wanted to do. And so, that's pretty much been my professional life for the past, I don't know, 3 decades or so. But as a child, I grew up in a family of 12 and um, in Brooklyn, New York, and Brooklyn and Queens, New York. And I went to Oberlin and I studied music there, and I got a master's in journalism in New York at Columbia. And I got into writing because I was into social justice at the time and still am to some degree, but thought that becoming a journalist would be a way to foster change and so forth. Uh, that said, I've always had a deep love I grew up as someone who played music, pretty much all my life. So that evolved from just bouncing between journalism and music for a few years, and then I quit journalism and was a musician for 8 or 9 years, and then from there I wrote my first book,
Hmm.
and then from there I just continued a creative life, writing books, playing music or composing music. I did musical theater. I've done a little bit of everything, script writing, and I've done quite a few different things. Always trying to just move toward the creative impulse.
Yeah, and I saw, thank you for sharing that. And I saw that you have been able to do that and to just follow, as you just said, your creative impulse. And just in the work that we do, we know that sometimes people don't follow those parts of them. And that's why I was just curious about your story about, in the time frame that you grew up and all that you had to experience. And I hope to get into that a little bit more. But how did you even allow yourself or give yourself permission to follow that creative part of you?
Well, I mean, I think um, for me, I mean, it's a little bit of a cheat because music was a part of my life as a child, and so when you grow into the understanding of who you are as a person, you realize that every musician has a story,
Yeah.
and they usually tell their story in their music. I'm just talking about instrumental music. I'm not talking about people who vocalize it. I mean, that's it's apparent. So um, I just was. What happens is that the creative life chooses you. You don't choose it. Then if you squelch it, then parts of you suffer,
Yeah.
and those around you suffer. So you have to really have to just you have to resign yourself to the fact that you're going to have to work in order to do what you have to take a job in order to do the work you like.
Yeah.
So when I took a job to do the work that I liked, I really worked very hard on the job. So I was always the first one there, and I would be there before everybody else,
Hmm.
and if I had to be the last to leave before, all the cleaning ladies at all the newspapers that I worked at knew who I was because I was always there, 2 in the morning and then 6 in the morning. And then I'd get up at noon and say, I'm done. And they'd say, oh, you're such a natural talent. You're a natural writer, but there's no such thing as a natural talent.
Yeah.
There's just talent and there's skill. A lot of people have talent, but the skill is something that you have to develop. So I've always gone to, in my life, I've always done the work that makes my talent um, uh, that I do the work that opens the pathway for my talent. You can't shoot it. I mean, look, there are a lot of people in this world who are 6 feet 5 and can shoot a jump shot from 15 feet.
Right.
But can you be 6 feet 5 and shoot a jump shot from 15 feet out with a guy your size sticking a finger in your face with one hand and pulling your shorts down with the other and calling your mother names? That's different.
Yeah.
And it's that way in every profession. You can't. So you just have to, you have to work hard to put blinders on and just do the job. And so that's pretty much been my philosophy. Just do the work, especially if it's work that you like.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. And, when I've talked to, and just worked with, some of the greatest in their fields, they say that. And I see you as one of the greats in your multiple fields, right? The ability to put in that work. And, the thought about quelching your creativity, how that impacts you and others, you know, in my journey, like that was a part of it, right? I didn't, I was and we'll get into more of this, from performing in church choirs to being in front of people, to then doing a little acting while also pursuing my degree to be a therapist. It was a process to give myself permission to do that. And so just to hear what you're saying, but also the part that I love the visual of 6'5" with someone pulling down your shorts while their hand is in your face. That you still have to have the work ethic, the skill, and was that innate for you? Was that just natural for you? I mean, I know like I've read and listened to some of the things that you've done, so I know that you've had lots of examples. But I'm wondering if there was any one in particular or any two that stuck out to you around work ethic, around showing up and building the skill and the talent.
Well, I mean, uh, I've had a lot of examples of people who have done, yeoman's work. I mean, I grew up in a house of 12. My mother was white. My father was black. They both worked hard. My mother was, she probably was the primary influence, although my father died before I was born, but my father and my stepfather were very hardworking people, and they were very bold, pretty bold guys. I mean, I just lived in a house where there were no excuses. You just had to. Now, you say that nowadays, you say it's a therapist, and it becomes a whole thing. And I really don't. I don't engage in that too much because nobody cares. You got to take care of your business, and once you take care of your business, then you do the healing and all that other stuff later. But what has to happen at the moment is, there's a math problem and you're in the eighth grade and it's got to be done. And if you don't do it, and if the next person does it, then they get a good grade and you don't. So in my house, there was just no space for that in my house because there was no one to, um, my mother didn't have the time to deal with that. And she just demanded good grades, and she demanded that you go to church. She demanded that you take care of yourself and you mind your business and you wash your face and you brush your teeth, and that was it. Um, so that was the first example of that. And then I just took that to college. I was just talking about that yesterday I did a session yesterday, did a record yesterday with about 15, maybe 18 musicians, and five of them were
Nice.
former Oberlin students.
Okay.
And we all studied with the same professor, a guy named Wendell Logan, who's African American who started the jazz department at Oberlin. He's since passed away, but he had the same philosophy. And I guess three of those people were black and two were white. One's from two of them were from Philadelphia. They
Okay.
came up, fantastic players, and fantastic people, which is more important. And a couple of them were young, like 28, 29, So they had the same philosophy, which you learn in music, which is that, the music is just a vessel that somebody left behind for you to participate in. Now, if you can't drive it, then someone else will come along who can.
Yeah.
So you drive it with a smile and be happy that you're doing it. It's music is a gift from God. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what kind of music it is. So um, any kind of talent that you have that you work to develop, you're developing what God gave you to give. And if you don't develop it, then, and I'll append that, since you're a social service agency that deals with therapy, I'll append that by saying, when we did this session yesterday, we started 3 days ago. They didn't have enough chairs. They didn't have enough chairs for 18 musicians. So I took some folding chairs and put them in the back of my truck. And while driving there home the night before last, I got stopped by the cops. And the guy gave me a ticket for having folding chairs in the back of my pickup.
Really?
And he was really trying to arrest me. Now, there's a lot of ways you could deal with that.
Yeah.
The way I dealt with it was, well, I just paid the ticket. he had a whole bunch of questions. He thought I was drunk. I mean, all the usual nonsense. But
Mm-hmm.
I just put that aside. I mean, I got through the moment. I didn't lose my cool. The next day we did the session. It was a great session.
Mm.
And in fact, when I got up the next day, when I got home after the guy gave me the ticket for having the chairs in the back of my pickup truck, I took the chairs out, put them in my garage, and then I left the next day and then realized I needed them. So I had to go
Yeah.
back and get them.
Yeah.
So I went and got them and we did the session. And, I simply forgot all about it. I mean, look, I don't think, forgetting all about something is almost as good as forgiving.
That's not easy. I mean, like as you say that, like I think about like so many black men, so many people of color who get pulled over for just about anything, have their heart racing just because they see the lights. While some people might be oblivious to that, and at this point you were able to keep your cool. I would imagine it wasn't the first time you were pulled over, and
I don't look, I mean, I've been pulled over so much. Look, I don't even, I think the bigger question is not the element of being pulled over, but the whole larger questions that our society has a difficulty addressing,
mm-hmm,
which is that um, this business of social justice um, is going to either just drive us into civil war or make us into a greater country. I think anyone who is concerned about the history of where America is going should read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shirer, see the journey of the Jewish people in Germany, see what happened. Because a lot of what you see now,
yeah,
a lot of what we've seen the last 3 or 4 years is what happened to the Jewish people in Germany when Hitler came to power.
mm-hmm,
So either we pay attention to that or we don't. And if we don't, then we'll suffer the consequences. But either way, I know that I personally and professionally do the best I can. And politically, when I say politically, I mean by giving money.
mm-hmm,
I do the best I can to make sure that however the ledger falls at the end of time, that I've been on the right side of justice and the right side of the issues. If you want to call these things issues, they shouldn't be issues. They should be, um, the things that are natural. Now, that said, I, I can only consign myself to a certain amount of time reading about this. I don't have a TV, so I don't watch TV, so I don't know what's said on TV. You don't need to. All you can do is look around, but I don't consign myself to reading about this stuff all day long. Read about it in the morning, make a few decisions about it in my head, and then I just block it out and move on with the knowledge that things are they're not getting better fast enough.
yeah, yeah. And just listening to what you're saying, your commitment to social justice, your commitment to being on the right side of justice, um, and even from what I've read from your book, The Color of Water, it sounds like you grew up in that. I mean, not only time wise, but family wise, the thought of be aware of your identity, or at least question your identity, question your place in the world, question or challenge those. I was struck by the moment in the book where you talk about as a young child thinking about the Black Panther and thinking of how that can impact your mother, uh, and I would imagine maybe at that young of age trying to decipher like which part of you do you honor in that moment, and then obviously grow into a place where you find a way how to honor all of your identities, and so I'm curious about growing up in that time frame, growing up in that family. Was it just automatic for you to be a social justice advocate or someone who cared about these particular issues?
Well, when you talk about The Color of Water, you're talking about a book that is like, almost 25 or 30 years old. I can't even remember what I wrote. I mean, I've written several books since
Right.
then.
Yes, you have.
Um, of course, yeah. Well, yeah, we were very much into social justice because we were products of a society. We were products of a marriage that was not really that was frowned upon by the greater society. I mean, today, these days, mixed races, it's like a new dance coming out. It's like, oh, the Watusi's here, and then here comes another one, and this one's half this, and this one's half that. My mother didn't really want to hear that because there was no dispute in her mind what kind of children she had. Her children were considered Negro or colored or black at the time. And so she didn't really, it wasn't any, I mean, she would say, you're a human being, educate your mind, or you're gonna be a nobody. But in the real world, when we walked out the door, she'd say, watch where you go, and you don't ask nobody for directions. If you get lost, just come home, and just watch what you do. You're not going to be, and it was just demanded of you excellence because we understood, from my mother and my stepfather that we had to do well. There wasn't any. We had the typical immigrant experience, and it was, when I say immigrant, I mean in New York
Mm-hmm.
and Philly too. Most of the black folks came from the South. Not all of them now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot came from Jamaica and Barbados and the so-called islands.
Mm-hmm.
But they had the same mentality: was just do the work and just look. I don't like hearing at my age. I don't want to hear excuses about you know because I work in my church still, the very same church my parents started. I still work in it.
That's
So
good.
I see what social justice looks like from the ground every week, every Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes Friday too. And that's been the last 8 years. So if the parents ain't doing the job, there's very little that anybody else can do.
Yeah.
And so you can, if you're gonna, if you have a life consigned that you're gonna be fixing fingernails or doing hair for the next 30 years, and you ain't priming little Junior or little Missy for college, then you're just wasting an opportunity. It doesn't matter what someone says about you or what they think about you. You just do your job and you do the work, and you use your religion as a tool and as a pathfinder to get you from one place to the next, with the understanding that no religion is better than the other.
Yeah.
My mother was Jewish, and she lost her religion when she married my father and became a Christian. But at the end of her life, and even before she died, I mean, years before she died, she developed a great respect for Judaism, because she realized that her experience with it was not normal.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not been much been said about. I mean, the way we deal with religion in this country is so pretty arcane. Mm-hmm. We're a very religious country on one hand. On the other hand, we're a country without social boundaries at all.
Yeah.
And most of us, most lay people, have very little true knowledge of the history of the religion that they practice every Sunday, or in the case of Jews, every Saturday, in the case of Muslims, whenever they go. They just have a these are the precepts, and this is what you're supposed to do, and you do it without question. As the older I get, the more reserved I become about religion. Mm. I'm sorry, I don't know how to make that thing stop.
Yeah, that's okay. No worries.
Because some of the things that happen in religion are just not, they're not conducive to us getting along. Mine is better than yours. God has spoken to me. Yeah. He told me I must attack the White House and find Nancy Pelosi and put a bullet in her brain, because God said so. And here's the American flag as proof. Yeah. Well, well, kiss my ass. That's what I said to that, really. That's what I said. Put me on the other side of that. That's how I feel about that. I mean, I'm beyond the point of saying people must change. We don't need that. We're at this point in America, in the year 2021, we are no longer at the point of saying, you must change your opinion in terms of our political life. We must force our will and force the law upon those who break the law. Period. That's it. If they don't like it, then they can put their hush puppies on and march march back to Norway, where they're supposedly doing so great and they love them. Other than that, there's nothing to debate, because the future of our children and grandchildren and the world is at stake.
Yeah. And, there's a lot that you said that I'm really just, reflecting on. One, as you talk about living the immigrant experience, my parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles are all from Jamaica, and they came to the U.S. I was born in North Jersey, Inglewood, not far from where you are. Spent a lot of time in Hackensack, New Jersey, before I came down to the Philadelphia area. And today's a special day for me in terms of today's my mother's birthday, but I also lost my mother this year, and so the significance of a mother, the significance of someone who is not going to take no nonsense, who is about uh, leading by example, I can resonate with, and how that shapes you and how that shapes the person you become, and also the thought of thinking about religion and faith and how that is sometimes in some places put set up, as you said, for us to hurt and hate each other. And I think when I think about Counsel for Relationships, how we have people of various faiths, people who might not even ascribe to a particular faith, but yet we work together, and the goal is to continue to learn how to work together more. But that's not easy. It's not easy to connect with someone who might be Catholic, or someone who might be Jew, or some Jewish, someone who might be Muslim, someone of these different backgrounds. But it sounds like not only from your family, but also from your music, from your writing, from your life, you've been able to just connect with people. And how have you been able to do that?
I don't know, must be because of my good looks. I have no idea. I mean, um, I don't know. I like people that make me laugh, and I like to be around people who are funny. I don't know. I try not to hold someone's history against them. I mean, I have a lot of friends, for example, I have a lot of friends who are Trump. I mean, big time Trumpers. And they're good people. I like them a lot. I mean, a couple of them are 2 o'clock in the morning friends. I can call them at 2 o'clock in the morning. They'll come up, they'll show. Um, but that doesn't mean they're right when it comes to the survival of this nation and this world. If you're wrong, you're just wrong. You're wrong, you get a spanking. That's it now, and then you just call. But I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I don't really, I, I, I've been very judicious about who my friends are and who, the people are I let into my space. Um, but I always try to give people room to make a mistake because I've made many myself.
Yeah.
Um, I think music to some degree helps you because you end up, I mean, serious music. When I say serious music, I don't know what that means because these titles don't mean anything. I mean, a person's Jamaican, but I suppose you could say, is a Rastafarian Jamaican too? I mean, you get into these things, the islands, well, Manhattan's an island.
Yeah.
Which island people are you talking about? You're talking about Catholics from Manhattan, or you're talking about someone from Trinidad, Tobago? So
Yeah.
this language means nothing to me. I mean, when you study history, which I wish more people did,
Hmm.
you realize that, the power brokers are very clever. They figure out ways to divide us so that a chosen few
Yeah.
can have the biggest piece of the pie, and the rest cannot. But those of us who are raised with a sense of decency and morality, we spend our lives trying to understand where we can, how we can live a life of justice and goodness without hurting other people. Obviously, your mother did a very good job placing you where you are because, I know the state's very hard for Jamaican people in a lot of ways that most people don't understand because Jamaicans come out of this British thing,
Hmm.
which is extremely oppressive.
Yeah.
One could say, I mean, in terms of racism, the British really are pretty high up, and in some ways, much higher than the Americans when it comes to selling that whole race business.
Yeah.
That's one reason why we're in this. If you really want to get deep about it, which I don't want to, but so
I'm always open to going deep, but I get it.
no, I mean it's not worth it because I mean I don't really. Why talk about the problem? I'm only interested in solutions.
Yeah.
Personally, that's why I run this program at my church. We deal with kids, we teach them music, et cetera, et cetera. Because people who make, I'm just not. I don't. You start talking about the problems, you get. It makes you depressed. You haven't solved anything. Tell me a dirty joke. I'm in. But I don't want to hear about the problems. I know what the problem. We all know what the problems are.
Yeah.
But the solutions are really the things that are of interest to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
For example,
Yes.
for example, If we had a program in this country, and I guess I'm talking as someone who doesn't work in the social science, social services. We had a program where everyone who graduated high school had to serve their community for a year and got college credit for it. They just, instead of going to college, they had to go out and work in a gas station or a 7-Eleven
Mm-hmm.
or building a house
Mm-hmm.
or working as a plumber's apprentice. Our country would be so much better off.
Yeah.
And everyone, without exception, I think they have to do that in Israel, but they don't. We don't have to do that here. And it's something that we really should do, because most people in North Philly, for example, in certain sections in North Philly, they have no idea what it's like to live in, Westmount area, or the better parts of West Philly. They have no idea what that world. They walk past each other. They don't even see each other.
Yeah.
So, and vice versa. If these youngsters had a chance to do that, then I think we would we would get along a lot better.
And I think that that's why I also appreciate your following your creative impulses, your creative uh, part of you, right? Because I think sometimes allowing creativity and the creative that's within us allows us to connect with people from all different walks of life, and to just appreciate the art, appreciate what you're producing, appreciate how that might impact somebody else. And yeah, like there's so many places where people on one side take a gap year, and then on the other side don't move out of a 3 to 4 block radius. They could have downtown close to them, but never actually go downtown or to the other part of the city. And I've seen that in Philly as well as in other cities and other places across the country. And so, right, like the thought of doing some type of service or act like that could allow you to experience other people, which I think is part of what
Well,
allows us to
I
connect.
mean, part of the problem in this country is that, and I'm just talking about America in general, and I'm just talking about it as not as just to pound the problem to the dust, but just to capture it. I've found in my life that if you get in the back of a cab in Dakar, Senegal, the cab driver driving the car will know more about world affairs, and current events
Yes.
than your basic trader on Wall Street who's making 400 grand a year, knocking against a computer, selling off, Robin Hood or whatever, Tesla, whatever it is, because we have this whole worship of money and this whole thing of individualism, and what has slipped away from this country, in my opinion, is the desire and the demand that young people study the liberal arts, anthropology, economics, sociology, those things that open your mind to learning. And without that, you have no appreciation of history. And without an appreciation of history, your life becomes one series of TikTok, Instagram,
Yes.
Facebook blurs from one to the next. I don't know how any of those things work, but I can see the effect of those things. So how can you demand understanding about the complexities of historical culture when you don't, when you're getting information from TikTok?
Right. No, you're right. I
So
fully go ahead.
if I were president, I would just say, I'm not giving the state of Pennsylvania or the state of Alabama, I'm not giving you a dime of federal money until I hear about your program of 1 year internships for high school students, every high school student, public or private school. And so what happens is the corporate fathers say that's great for North Philly,
Hmm.
but over here in Jenkintown, we're not going to do that, so.
You know Philly really well. You've been around.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. My mother lived in Philly. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew the down south and the New York. I didn't know as much about the Philly part. Um, I appreciate what you're saying, and the solutions, and what is needed. And like I said, at Counsel for Relationships, we've been on this journey for ourselves to find some solutions to be better. And there's a way that I hear you also talking about what is happening now in our climate, in our from racial stuff, or people's further awareness of it. How I've said it in my own life is that racism has been around, and I've felt it in lots of different ways. But for a lot of people, they're more aware of it now in the past year and a half. And I'm wondering, is there anything that you think people could do or should do during this time frame that is either different from what you experienced growing up, or similar. Like, I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts about what people should be doing now about being intentional to fight against racism in particular?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that. I could say if you have to vote, really, you have to vote. I mean, if you don't vote, I mean, barbershop conversations are great for TV shows, but in real life, you got to go out and you got to vote. But I've always been a person who I've enjoyed different cultures for myself. I enjoy people who are different from me. I
Yeah.
mean, B's brother-in-law is my best friend. He's very, very, very Jewish guy, if that, whatever that means,
Right.
and don't get into asking what is a Jew. You'll get, if you ask five different people, you get five different answers.
Right.
But I mean,
But you opened yourself to that relationship. I mean, and I find myself doing very similar things, being open to connections and relationships. But I know so many people who are hardened to that or resistant to that. It's a deliberate choice. I mean, it's probably just natural for you. You just do it. It doesn't
well,
seem like
listen,
a choice.
greatness doesn't come to people who can't listen. If you're so right and you're so great, then why are you driving that beer truck? Why do you have to go to, if you're so smart and you know so much, and you know the name of the Philadelphia Eagles quarterback, do you know the name of the person in Congress who represents you? I mean, because if you don't, you ain't that smart. And I'd rather be around smart people.
Yeah.
Now, everybody who I know who's smart, they're not necessarily educated formally, but
Mhm.
I don't really know. I mean, um, look, in terms of my own personal relationships, when you get older, your world tightens, and you only have those you work with and those you love, and um, I know coming up, I went to integrated schools mostly, and
Mhm.
so now the whole business of I mean, so much this the language that is used is a trap to make you feel a certain way, to guide you into a certain way of thinking, and you have to just avoid that. Either a person's really decent or they're not,
Yeah.
and it's not hard to figure that out.
Yeah. I could hear, like, as you've said, like, from the powers that be, the structures that are there, the intentionality of the systems that is there, that sets people to have debates over a quarterback, but not really think about who is their congressperson, or to have debates about names and words, but not about sometimes character. And I could hear that. I want
Well, I
to
mean,
go
people
ahead.
don't have a wall to push against,
Mm,
see? And so they create a wall to push against. And so this sense of identity, which is rooted in religion and culture and race, gets moved.
yeah.
And it's not our job to judge how their identity eventually evolves. Should their identity evolve from man to woman to a they, for example, that's not our business to judge whether that evolution is proper or not. Our business is to make sure that society is fair to all people, no matter who they are. But if you make a crusade out of it and wave it around like a baseball bat, you become just like the other side.
Yeah.
you know you I mean, in my life, I mean, I hate talking about myself, really. I mean, because it just, I've had to do it so much so professionally. But my mother never said a word when people would call her names.
Mm,
They call her all kinds of names when she walked down the street. She would ignore it, and she'd forget it, and she'd really forget it. She'd like
wow.
actually forget it. It just didn't it just went right over her head. And part of that is, I don't know, that's just who she was.
You had to. It's survival.
She grew up in an environment where Jews were discriminated against, um, uh, very badly in the South. And she never forgot that. She took those lessons over to the world when she raised us in Black America. But she learned to just move past that. You have to move past those obstacles.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to be stuck.
And obviously, like, I agree. And in the work that we do, I realize more and more how for some people it's hard to move past things. They do get stuck, and it's their mind is on repeat or their emotions are on repeat, and it for some people it is hard to forget, and it is a good skill even to forget, to not let it sink in and impact you, because I would imagine for your mother and even for yourself, like there's other things you got to deal with. There's more important things you got to focus on. I'm curious. I want to shift completely. As you've talked about playing, being a musician for like 9 years before being writing your first book. Like, what was like, if you can, maybe there might be one or two, like the best set, the best memory you have as a musician during that time that just sticks out to you.
Oh God, man. I mean, well, I mean, those were lean years, but they were probably the most fun. I mean, they definitely were the most fun. There's not one. I mean, I used to play down on Bleecker Street, which is in the village, and that's when CBGBs was still there. And, there were a lot of people walking around. You'd walk around. There were great musicians walking around everywhere. Some of whom became famous, and some of whom didn't. I mean, I remember probably one of the best moments I ever had was when I was playing with little Jimmy Scott, who's a jazz singer, and he has a distinctive. If you ever hear his music, he sounds like a girl or a woman or whatever. He sounds. And I one time he asked me to walk with him to the store, which was like a big treat because since he was the leader of the band, you were just in the band. When you're a musician, you're just in the band.
Right.
I mean, how many of your people watching this have hired wedding bands and they lean over they say, play something slow. I mean, they have no idea. I was thinking this morning, I just want to make a very important point. We respect arts in this country about this much.
Yeah.
We have no respect for the arts. And I'll give you a good example, as I was thinking of this the other day. We were talking. There was a time when they said Bill Clinton played the saxophone. Mm-hmm. And so somebody handed him a saxophone when he was like at some event, and he put the horn on and he played it and he like honked a few notes with the band, and the press, the national and international press, CNN, and all these people who are among the smartest people in the world, they were just so thrilled by how good he could play. And the cat couldn't play shit. He sounded terrible. He sounded like a bad high school. He sounded like a freshman playing high school saxophone in a band. No, I mean, as a politician,
right.
I'm not.
That might have been the last time he played. It might have been that long.
It doesn't matter though. If he could really play, you could hear a couple bars of it. Sure. Right. So my point is that's how unsophisticated we are about music. Yeah. We're so unsophisticated about music that the Philadelphia Orchestra that has existed for the last century and a half, it cannot find more than 4 or 5 black players. In my lifetime, I don't think I've ever known of 3. You're going to tell me there are not 10 or 12 or 15 string players who are African-American who are good enough to play in the Philadelphia Orchestra? Yeah. Bullshit. Yeah. So when you say that, I can say it because if I was in classical music, I wouldn't get a job. You wouldn't hear from me for the rest of my career. And that's happened in the real world. So my point is that we are so unsophisticated about art, mm-hmm. and culture, mm-hmm. just regular culture, that anything goes. So there's someone like Lil Wayne who can't even slap 2 words together without saying MF and this, that, and the other is considered an artist when he's not that. In many things, an artist he is not. Yeah. But again, the language that we use to describe things and each other is couched in history, and the language we use to describe education, art, and science. Well, not science, because I don't know that much about science, but certainly art is framed in a cultural prison that doesn't allow us to see excellence even among our own children. Yeah. So the children who become adults who play music that I've met, for example, these young guys from Philly, both of them had very strong mothers. Both of them had fathers as well who just said, okay, do you like music? Just do it and do it as well as you can do it. And if you can't get a job doing it, well, you'll find a way. You just keep doing it, mm-hmm. and do it as much as you can. Mm-hmm. So that's what happened with. Now, my mother didn't like music. She was dead set. She her whole thing was the whole Jewish mom thing. Be a doctor, because she felt like doctors eat all the time. But that didn't work for me. Right, but later on, she was. She was okay later with it.
But once again, you followed these and I could hear how passionate you are about music and culture and the arts and how that is, I think, part of even what I'm hearing, a lane to create difference and change, right? Like the Philadelphia Orchestra, if they were to go out and find the talent that is there and make their orchestra more diverse, that does impact people. It
Well,
impacts the
listen,
people who get
well,
the
I don't want to get hung up with them because they're not the only ones. And I'm
right.
sure
No,
they'll say,
right. I
we're
know it's an
trying very
example.
hard to do
Right,
it. And they have a lot of
right,
corporate money in this, of course, and our board and blah, blah, blah. I
right.
mean, I'm not interested in the blah, 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 they're never, if you can't hold their feet to the fire without looking at the union in Philadelphia, for the musicians union and so forth. I mean, the bare fact of, since we're talking about Philadelphia, is that, and because I know a lot about Philadelphia, because I played there for years and I've worked with musicians for there for years. The bare fact is Philadelphia has produced probably maybe 30% of the greatest musicians this country has ever, just in jazz.
Yeah, yeah,
But you wouldn't know it.
yeah,
Camden
yeah,
has produced probably the top 3 or 4 jazz organists of all time. You wouldn't know that.
yeah.
So these people come out of these places, they all leave Philly, they go somewhere else, and nobody thinks about it. So that's just, don't even get me started with the gospel part of it, because Philadelphia's gospel tradition is not as great as Chicago's, but it's pretty high up there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just that music. If you want to talk about Yiddish music, Philadelphia Yiddish, the musicians who played Yiddish music, which is just a fantastic musical art form.
Hmm.
So many great Yiddish players came out of Philly.
Wow.
You wouldn't know it.
Yeah.
They're not taught in public schools. People don't even know what Yiddish music is. They don't even know what Yiddish is. What we're getting from Philly is that same old white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, view of the world. Look, I believe that Beethoven and Brahms and Mendelssohn are the great ones. I mean, you can't pull a third violin. If you pull a third violin part out of a Beethoven piece, it will make perfect sense. But it doesn't change the fact that most people don't even know who he is.
Yeah.
And if they did, I mean, if kids from Philadelphia were allowed to really understand, and if they were taught art, they would be so much better. They would know so much more. Because in my house, that was part of our thing. Art was a big thing in my house.
I agree that it is really important. And as you were just talking about the Philadelphia area and music, one, I'm curious now to learn more about Yiddish music, because I have not known of that because of just not having that experience or even being connected to that. So everyone from Counsel, you can send me some. Maybe you'll share some with me. I'm also thinking about, like, there's someone that I knew that played and grew up in the church that I attended, who is a great musician and has now gone on to play. His name is Derek Hodge, and he's been able to play with,
I know Derek Hodge. He's a bass player.
Yeah, and he's done stuff with Terrence Blanchard and a whole bunch of it, music director for lots of folks. But because I know a little bit of his story, I can resonate with what you're saying. If I didn't know his story, I wouldn't even know that there are so many others like him who came out of this area, talented musicians, played and now have seen the world because of their art and creativity.
Well, I mean, I don't know if he's still alive, but Joseph Field and his wife Marie Field, they've given a lot to the music. Joseph Field, he's a violinist. He's a very fine musician, and they've done, I don't know what he's doing. I have been in Philly in that area for a long time, and they've done a lot to try to get public schools in Philadelphia to get serious about music. I think that look, if you're interested in the literary world, if you're interested in history and science and computers and math, if I run a Fortune 500 company and I want someone in my company who knows something about teamwork, about reading, about literacy, about math, about science, I want someone who's a musician, because music teaches you all those things. And that stuff used to be in public schools everywhere. Yeah. And the lack of it means that we're training people to be, say, nurses who have no idea who Elvis Presley is or who Howlin' Wolf is. And that kind of information makes you a bigger, better, and more well-rounded person. Because music forces you to think, forces you to move outside your world. Yeah. I mean, you haven't lived until you've heard Mickey Katz is a clarinetist, klezmer guy. When you hear Mickey Katz blow full out, you realize that this guy is playing from a history that we know nothing about. So then you become interested in the history, and you find the connective tissue that makes that history part of your history. Yeah. And that's what you do when you write books and films and so forth. You find connective elements.
I'm glad that you brought it there, because as I was listening to you, that's part of what I was thinking about, is this the appreciation of music, and someone just, you know, one of those terms, being in the pocket, someone just doing a really really great and playing the instrument, and then like you said, you get curious about them and curious about the history and what maybe fueled that. I could see how that could relate to the art of being a writer, or a screenplay or a movie, and I'm assuming that's what you've also done in your life, to use that same force, that creativity, that connection and connective tissue to flow through the various ways, because you've been able to touch people through music, through books, through movies, through scores, and to me that is just a great way to influence, and that's, I think, part of even why we're here today, is that's made us really curious about you and your story and how you've been able to do that. And I know you talk about yourself a lot, and that's what people ask, but it is impressive and fascinating because you've been able to do that, and and I think that's part of what pulls people in to, like, I hear how passionate you are about just high schoolers and learning music, right? Like it, I think that you could talk to me about that for the next hour versus anything else, which talks about your core and your character, about making the difference for people in so many ways.
Well, my sister Judy teaches in Yarby or something, Yaden or something. I forgot what it's called, but it's somewhere. It's,
Dayton is one of the towns, yeah,
is
or
it
Yardley. Yeah,
Darby,
both of those.
Darby? I can't remember the
There's a
name of the school.
Derby
I go
too.
there every year because she has a play. She does musicals with these kids, and they're fantastic. I mean, and she teaches in middle school, and a lot of the high school kids come to play. I mean, come to join her musicals because they just love the idea of being in a music. They love to sing.
Yeah,
Some of them are football players, and their parents are from Nigeria, and they got these singing guys and dolls with accents,
nice.
But they're great.
That was one of my first plays that I did, Guys and Dolls. So I could just
Yeah,
see
I
that. That's
mean,
awesome.
this is the kind of stuff that makes you listen. If you got a guy who's on the football team and is a tackle and he's singing guys and dolls, and his parents grew up in Nairobi or in Senegal somewhere, and they're singing guys and dolls, you're making the cultural connection.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
making it with him, and you're making it with the audience.
Yeah.
You're spreading love and peace right there, and that's a teacher doing that in a
Yeah.
school, in a little middle school, uh, in somewhere out near
Right.
Philly. So,
To
I
go from
mean,
Marlon Brando to Senegal is a pretty big step.
because the art doesn't care where you're from.
Yeah.
Art doesn't care that what your religion or even your politics is. It just cares that it drives in and then it pushes around and then it comes out. So um, look, you know, what happens is that when you get older, society tries to push the innocence out of your mind and out of your soul and fill it with socio-political gobbledygook. And so
Hmm.
then there's a committee formed, and you serve on the committee for 5 years, and a great thing has happened because the committee has met, and you had cheesecake, and it was great.
Right.
I don't waste time with that nonsense. You know, I used to work with a guy. He was a drummer. He was kind of a mean guy. He was really kind of a mean cat. But one of the things he used to do, I used to appreciate when we would play. He, the guy who ran the band, he would turn around to us and he'd say, "Okay, we're gonna do this song. It's in E flat. Remember the bridge is in G, but it's E flat." And the audience is right there, and the guy playing drums would be sitting there like this, and then he'd just say, "Count it off. 1, 2, 3," and he'd just start playing, and then you forced to just sort of like
Yeah.
adjust and adapt, and that's really how I feel about a lot of this talk about race and culture. I mean, we have a bunch of poverty pimps running around in all types, with all religions, races, all colors, all sexes, and they're using that and they're getting really rich off of it.
Yeah.
They're getting really powerful off of it,
Yeah.
while the rest of us are
Yeah.
suffering under the hand of a police department, of a police state that America is fast becoming, and that's really the dangerous part.
Yeah.
That the police are forced to, or encouraged to, or have decided to enforce these laws, these new laws, electorally and otherwise, that are forcing us into a terrible place. But that's a whole nother conversation. But that's kind of where
It is, and once again, I appreciate you once again making the connection between art and social justice, art and appreciating people and not division, being a musician and just flowing and adjustment. And, that's one of the things I love about. I have friends who are musicians. I wasn't blessed with that gift, but just being around them and how they could like just pick up on each other and flow with each other, and nobody even knows it, but they know what they're doing, is to me just beautiful. And that when you can be in that space and adapt and flow, and if you could take that as a who you are personally, that can allow you to do so many other things.
Well,
And
it builds community, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah. In our last, few minutes, probably the last half hour, I want to encourage anybody, if you do have questions, please feel free. I will try to integrate them. I want to just add some things or ask some things that I've been thinking about, but more so about where you are in your career. I know that Deacon King Kong came out earlier this year. It's widely loved and appreciated and honored and awarded. And one of my colleagues was wondering, what did that all come through your imagination? It's so descriptive, it's so clear, or was that just you and your writing process?
Well, I mean, well, fiction, fiction is a little different than nonfiction, in that fiction allows characters to sort of drive the story, and they give the story direction, and the direction they move in. If your character's strong enough, plot will start to grow. It'll start to sprout. I mean, if you imagine someone's walking down a path with barren dirt on either side of them, if the character's strong enough, the, the forest will just sprout and grow right next to them as they walk, and then eventually push ahead of them until they walk until there's nowhere to go. They have to, it grows out of their desires and their motivation, and the path is driven by that blend of character and story. So, I mean, Deacon King Kong is one of those stories where I've always liked the old black guy who just so, I mean, everybody has an uncle like that who shows up at Christmas and takes out their teeth.
Yeah.
But so I just I just put that kind of guy into motion at a time in New York when the 60s was still, it was still 69, was still, there's still some quote unquote innocence around, if that's the right way of expressing or looking at it. And then I let the rest roll out because it is about, about a neighborhood and a neighborhood that's changing, a neighborhood that's, mixed. Again, what does that word mean? I don't know, but it's about a neighborhood that within a neighborhood, a Black and Latino housing project surrounded by an Italian neighborhood, policed by Irish American individuals, and how these people get along. Philly is very much like that.
Yeah.
And in that regard, it's a great city because people have been forced by dint of geography to be close to each other, and in some ways they are forced to get along. The problem is that the pervasive racism that lives within the framework of this country, and anti-Semitism as well, is laced into the history of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And so it's created enormous problems. They were really exacerbated by its history and from the Rizzo years. So, I mean, for me, I wrote Deacon King Kong with all that stuff in my head, but knowing I wanted to write a story that was funny, because I don't want to write a story that says take your medicine. What I try to do is create art that gives us a chance gives us a chance to dialogue. Yeah. Give us a chance to say, oh, I was wrong, or oh, I see why you have that point of view. Or, oh, I understand. Aren't they funny? I mean, what's funnier? What's funnier than, look, there's nothing funnier than watching, two Black women argue over the cost of a brake job. But that said, there's nothing funnier than watching two Jewish women argue over the cost of a brake job either. Now, you take out the Black or the Jewish or the Arab or the Muslim, everybody's funny,
Yeah.
and everyone claims this or that for their culture.
But you have to
But
be attuned to it some, or be open to the the parts of that that can be humorous or light. Like
well, that's where I live. See,
right, right,
that's what if you want to have a career as a writer or as a musician or as an artist of any type, you live in the good. You find the good. You live on the good land,
yeah.
no matter how small a slice of land that is.
And I appreciate you sharing that. And as we move forward, I'm wondering, is there anything that you are working on now, or aspiring to work on? Like, right, what is new and hot for you right now?
I mean, I'm working on another book. I never talk about them while I'm being made because they change so much. You start out writing a mystery novel, it turns into a comic.
Right,
Uh, I just finished the record. I don't know what I'm going to do with it because it's not a, you don't do records now, and you know, they're not distributed the same way.
right,
You
right.
do what Drake does. You drop,
Just
you
drop it.
drop it. There's the whole dropping
Release
thing.
date.
Yeah, yeah, you got to drop. I'm dropping now. I got a few droplets,
All right.
but
We'll check it out on iTunes and
yeah,
Spotify.
I mean, I just, I'm not in a hurry to finish it.
Okay.
I'm working on an opera. I always have, I'm always pregnant with stuff.
Good. I love that. I love that phrase. I'm always pregnant with stuff. And I think that's the joy and complexity of being a creative, being a musician, being an artist, being a writer, is that there's always things that you're going to give birth to. And so you got to be pregnant with it first. And so I really love that. Um, we've been talking a lot about lots of various things, and as you know, everyone, or mostly everyone that's listening, is connected to mental health in some way. And I'm curious for you, like, what does mental wellness or even mental health mean to you?
Uh, you know, um, well, I guess it means the ability to fail and to forgive yourself for failure and have a way of expressing yourself. Um, I went to marriage therapy with my ex-wife. It didn't work. I don't think
It
the
doesn't work
marriage
for
therapy
everybody.
was supposed to. I don't think it wasn't going to work whether we had therapy or not.
Hmm.
But I think mental wellness is good. I think it's a good thing. I think for me, I don't feel I need it um, because I have ways of expressing my sorrow and pain. I have people I can do that with,
Hmm.
and sometimes I need them more or less, and I need these things more or less. But I feel pretty mentally solid. Um, I'm probably a little more angry these days than I am normally, only because I can look when you're a writer or an artist of any type, you're a witness to the world,
Yeah.
and you're powerless to do anything about it. I mean, you can't just keep writing op-eds to the New York Times and expect people to change. Something really has to happen.
Yeah.
So that makes me feel a bit frustrated. Knowing that if we don't pay attention, that we could be in the middle of a civil war, and it's real, and people are not paying attention. They're worried about who the quarterback is for the
Hmm.
Oakland Raiders or whatever. But um, obviously, we have tremendous mental health issues in this country, and I see it all the time. And I wish that I wish more could be done. But I think at the core of it, or one of the cores of it, we just talked about, is that this is a country that doesn't respect art. It doesn't respect history. It doesn't respect the liberal arts. So there's no means of when one has no means of expressing themselves, and you have 390 million guns around.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
there you
Right.
go.
Right, I agree. There's a link, right? There's a link to the devaluing of creativity, art, culture, music, and the increase in how people use unhealthy, destructive ways to express themselves.
Of
Uh,
course, yeah. Reason and discourse is goes out the window
yeah.
when you talk about this whole business of individualism. I got mine, you got yours. Work hard. All that other nonsense.
One of my
Um,
colleagues asked, earlier you talked about how everything you learned from your mother and family, and hard work, and just even as we've been going through this conversation. And as therapists, we're often working with families or couples. And the question was, what are things that we could know or think about to help parents do right by their kids?
Well, I mean, well, first of all, I can, if it's just one parent, then you have control. If it's two parents, then both of you don't have control, and then the mother has control. That's been my experience.
Hmm.
So if you're the mother, then you have control. You might not feel like you have control, but if it's a father and the mother, still the mother has control. There's a connection with the mother. Been my experience. So I mean, I think the most important thing that important advice I could give is consistency,
Hmm.
because kids watch what you do, not what you say.
Yeah.
And if you have to be consistent, and if you're not consistent, then they'll find the gap very quickly, and then they exploit it. And then that little boy or girl that you gave everything to will start to find other ways to express him or herself.
Hmm.
Um, I've when I raised my own children, I always tried to um, demand excellence, but in whatever they did. So if they did something that was like something stupid, I'd say, well, you did it good, so it was all right. I mean, and in my family, my mother was the same way. But that said, um, um, I always asked for, as a child, I was always expected to do well in school, because education was valued, and I felt that way for my own kids. Um, at a certain point, you just can't. I have kids in Red Hook, where the child's raising the mother.
Yeah.
If the child's raising the mother, I mean, sometimes it works out because the child really knows what they're doing, but most of the times it doesn't.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of really good kids. I can think of a couple who are in jail or headed to jail, and who were raised by really, really good people.
Hmm.
But they didn't demand. And the other thing was that my mother did, and what I try to do with my kids, is I just didn't let them follow the crowd.
Yeah.
I never cared what, my son was complaining recently, you don't know the names of my friends. I said, I'm not raising them. I
Right.
don't care who they are. I
I'm
mean,
responsible
I'm
for
assuming they're
you.
good. Huh?
Yeah, I'm responsible for you.
Yeah, I don't care about your friends. I don't care what your friends do.
Yeah.
I don't care if they go to Yale or they go to jail. I don't care.
Right.
I'm not, I mean, you don't know my good friend. You don't respect my friend. No, it's not about respect. I don't care about them. So that comes from my mother as well. She was that way. And, you know, when you give a kid a cell phone at 12 or 13, you are handing them a life of submission.
Yep.
That's it. That's the bottom line. I mean, I want to protect them because they have to contact you. Where do they have to call you? What's so important that they have to call you just don't give them a cell phone till they're 12 or 13. I mean, even then you're asking for trouble.
It's interesting. Like my wife and I were having that conversation recently, where that is part of our stance, right? For our own reasons, not wanting to give our 11-year-old a cell phone yet. While she might have friends that have cell phones, so be it, right? But those decisions that we have to make, that we believe honestly are shaping the future of those that we love. And then as clinicians, trying to help the families think through these decisions. How do they model? How do they not let their kids parent? And I really appreciate what you mentioned about paying attention to the gap, right? Because the gap is what most children will
That's
look
where it
for
happens.
and
Yeah, that's
exploit
what
the
happens.
gap.
Sure. Yeah.
So I
Well,
appreciate that.
look, if you don't, if you have to develop good parent, you have to develop good habits. We didn't have we were allowed to watch TV on Sundays, and we went to the library.
Mm.
I see it in Red Hook. The kids who are in the library, most of them come from Trinidad, Jamaica, China, Mexico, Ecuador. They're all children of immigrants. The ones who've been in the projects 2 or 3 generations, you never see their kids in the library.
Yeah.
The library now is a community center. Philadelphia has great libraries. I know they have problems with their libraries, but they have great librarians there.
Yeah.
If you get your kid into the habit of reading, I know they don't like to read. If there's nothing else to do, they'll read a book.
Yeah.
If there's nothing to turn on, they'll play the piano.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I play the piano, and I'm a saxophonist by trade, but I write music. I mean, I played piano, in church because that's all we had to do in the house. There's a piano there, so he played, and then when he got, I played. But they have all this. They can when they can do this, they can pick up this thing here.
Yep.
You can forget it.
And a lot of my colleagues are agreeing, that there is distractions and the screen time, and there might be a place for that, like a Saturday or Sunday. But there's something about allowing yourself to grow and to read and to play and to be creative that happens when you don't have these other distractions. I'm curious, with everything that you've done, all that you continue to do, like, who is somebody you would love to work with? Whether as a musician, someone you would love to be in the band with them, or someone you would like to write with, or someone you'd like to take on your movie and direct, or take on a book that you've written and turn to a movie and direct it. Like, who would you want to work with?
Well, I'm not that interested in TV and films anymore. I've had enough experience with it to,
Okay.
you know, I make I make enough of a living writing books now. But look,
Nice.
I mean, yeah, if I wanted to do TV and films, I could make a lot more money. But I don't want to do that, man. I just can't. It's too much. It's not. It's soul crushing work, and I've quit many jobs in my life, and mostly because I was unhappy. I figured if I could I've always felt I've had enough to buy some new jeans and food for a week, I was good. So that's where I'm at now. So there's nobody in the business I want to work with. I can say that when I work with some people, they were great. When I worked with Spike Lee, he was great. He works as hard as I do, and I work as hard as anybody.
Yeah.
I'm up at 4. I was up at 4:30 or 5 this morning. When on Spike's set, he's the first guy there. He works as hard as anybody. Ethan Hawke is another one.
Yeah.
And Ethan Hawke he's terribly literate. He reads all the time. Reads Shakespeare. He loves to read, and he's a very good writer. And that's part of the reason why his career has lasted so long, because he's so well read, and he reads the whole book. So but who I'd like to work with, no, there's nobody. I mean, I'm all right. God has just blessed me. I don't need to. My joy is working, and like I said, I've been in this program in my church for the last, since 2012. So, and we have our first kid is getting ready to go to college.
Nice.
Next year. So we're working on her FAFSA forms and all this stuff. She's like we've lost a lot of kids.
Yeah.
But this one made it. So that to me is just so much. It just means so much to me.
I can tell, and it is that's the when you mentioned about some work being soul crushing, the way that you describe this work with these young folks sound like it's soul filling, right? Like that it feeds your soul, and that it's joy to see them flourish or even struggle, but still stick it out.
Well, there was a guy in Philly when I was in college. My mother moved to Philly when I was in school, and I got a job at a place called Variety Club Camp, which was outside of Philly for handicapped kids. And there was a guy who ran it named Cy Friend. He was a middle-aged, well, he was young back then, and he ran it like the United Nations. It was all people of different races. This is back in the 70s. And it was just an extraordinary experience to see this guy do this so long ago. And the other thing was that he was gay, and he had to keep it hidden. Some of us knew it. And, his philosophy in terms of who should be working there and who shouldn't was something that I've always kept in my life since then. And he had a way of 5 minutes into the conversation, he could tell whether you had a good heart, and you would be the one that would have your hands on his children, his disabled children, and all the children were disabled. He had a way of figuring out people. He just had and I've spent my life thinking about, ways that I can really quickly sum up who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
Because part of my job is to make sure that my characters in my books are spot on, and that my life is spot on, at least in the way God would want me to be. Absolutely. So while this program in Brooklyn it's a pain in the ass, really, it has been one of the highlights of my life.
That's so great to hear. One of my colleagues said, Variety Club is still a wonderful camp. Uh,
Yeah, I've seen the recent versions of it, but it's great. It's still wonderful.
yeah.
But I mean, the way Cy ran it back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, they would put him in jail now for what he would take kids on hikes on the road. I mean, they would just put him in jail because he didn't conform to societal standard. That said, the parents of those children loved him.
Hmm.
And if any of them were watching, they'll tell you he was so special.
A question one of my colleagues asked that I think really adds to what you're saying now is this thought of, you've mentioned before about being able to see the good, being able to write about the good. Uh, how do you keep that alive when all of us, we have these rough edges, and then as you said earlier today, that sometimes some of us have more than rough edges. We're just on the wrong side, or just filled with such hatred and negativity. How do you keep that good in front of you?
Well, I don't open myself up to, conversations, or elements in my life that allow that in.
Hmm.
So, I maintain a great distance from the media thing. I don't know who's the hottest TV show. I don't know anything about any of that stuff. I read three newspapers every day, and I don't pay attention to the rest of it. So that's how
What are the three that you read?
I read the Philly.com, which is the Inquirer now. The Inquirer has gotten good. It used to be it got terrible. It was probably the greatest paper in America in the 80s.
Hmm.
Then it got awful. And then now it's getting good again. Philadelphia Inquirer, Daily News. I read those. That's one on Philly.com. Then I
Yeah.
read the Post in Washington and the Times in New York. I read them all. I get them all on the computer. I can read them in the morning or
Wow.
at dinner, and that's it. You know.
Right. So what
But
you?
Philly.com has actually gotten a lot better.
Okay.
It's and that's good to see because there's a guy named Will Bunch. He's a columnist down there in
Yeah.
Philly. He's
Yeah.
excellent, really smart guy. I read
I
him.
might have worked with him once. Um, I think that once again, hearing how you kind of fill yourself in these ways, and also keep out the nonsense, the distractions, the negative. Uh, in some of what we've talked about, I'm wondering, what advice would you give to your younger self, and that could be as young as yesterday.
Um, man, I don't know. I mean, I don't see any sense in looking back. The only thing I can say is I've pretty much always done what I wanted to do, and I've never been sorry.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I've made some mistakes, surely,
Hmm.
and I suffer and I have my pain. I've had my share of pain and suffering, but I know that I'm blessed, and so my job is to just put God first and be a blessing to somebody else, and that's something that's just part of uh, that's just the part of, I guess, my family culture, or just part of who I became. And how lucky can you get? I mean, you get to do what you like to do, and you like to help people, and you don't have to show up at a cubicle every day, which I've done, for
Yeah.
years at a time, but I don't have to do it no more. I mean, essentially, you decide how you want to be, and then you try to be that person. I think.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is.
Well, it sounds like that's what you've been able to do, and once again, I could really resonate with that. My faith has been a foundation for me, and still is. And gaining that from my mother, walking in and seeing her pray, seeing her come home from a night shift at the hospital, and then turn around and go back to church, and just seeing her have faith, right? And so those things have been instrumental for me in how I think about the world and the landscape. And so when you talk about just being blessed, and just finding a way to move forward and seeing the good in people, those are all things that feel very familiar for me. And so I appreciate you sharing that, in our conversation. I appreciate your time and your willingness to just, I feel like we just had a chat, like we're just talking, and that's really what I wanted, to just have a conversation as my phone rings, have a conversation with you, just to learn more and to hear from you. We have maybe about like 5 more minutes, and I wanted to at least give this time to see if there's anything that you wanted to say, or anything you wanted to ask, or anything you wanted to put out there, before we kind of finish out today.
I mean, I didn't shot my wad here. I don't have nothing. I mean, I don't really do these kinds of things anymore. I
Yeah.
mean, David asked me to do it, and I did it for him and for B and for your organization, and but um, I I'm I'm glad to hear that your mother lived long enough to see that her son made something of himself. Your mother's story is my mother's story. It's your mother's story is a listen. This country would be a lot better if women ran things. That's the truth of it.
True.
Um, I'm not talking about the shill that's the Supreme Court justice, not that one, not the latest one, but
Hmm.
but in general, when women are, I mean, I'm making generalities now, so I'm going to get in trouble. But I'll say this: that men have a testosterone driven business of I got to get up off the canvas, and they get knocked down one time, and then they just become, they're like little pansies, and they just they can't take it. But women have in this country, in this world, really have grown up taking emotional hits,
Yeah.
and they've developed enormous defense mechanisms and enormous recovery mechanisms that allow them to get up off the canvas when they've been taking these hits. And it makes them very wise younger, and it makes them extremely wise when they're older.
Yeah.
And so I wish women had more power in this country.
Yeah.
Good women. And I don't mean good women like a John Wayne type of good woman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean good women who are good people. That would help, because they raise good sons. They raise people like you.
Thank you.
And so I'd like to see more of that. I know that the Age Law Project in Philly is a group that I support. I love what they're trying to do. Rhonda Goldfein now you're talking about a good woman there. She's given her whole career to helping people who have mental problems and AIDS, of course. And
Mm-hmm.
she's been early on it, and she's in the middle of it now. And that's a group that deserves support. I mean, that's run by a woman.
Yeah.
And there's some strong women on that staff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any organization like that in New York.
Yeah.
So we need women to do more.
Mm-hmm.
We need women. We need to elevate women to positions of power in this country. Every good editor, the best editors I've ever had have all been, except with one exception, have been women.
Yeah, I agree in the value of so many women who have shaped my life, even at my work and beyond, including my mother, as I've shared earlier, and that there needs to be ways that some of the folks taking up space need to step out of the way so that there can be room for more
Absolutely.
women.
Yeah.
You know, I can't say enough how much I appreciate your willingness. I hear how like this is not what you do anymore. There's so much other ways that you could be spending this time, and I think at the foundation of this, your friendship and your loyalty to your friendship allowed you to say, "I'm going to do something that I don't normally do,"
Yeah.
and I
Well,
appreciate it.
I bet. Look, I can't afford to lose that
Right.
friendship.
And he owes you probably. So,
Well, actually, no, I kind of still owe him. So
uh,
this is just,
right,
but
right.
he's working it though. He's doing his best to, even things out. But that's all right. I enjoyed talking to you. I hope this was informative and helpful for you and for all the people watching, and
It has been, and B mentioned with great appreciation. We can't tell you thanks enough. Just giving us an opportunity just to hear you, hear your story, hear your creative process, hear your passion, hear your thoughts about race and identity, and so much more. And there's so many other questions I couldn't get to that others shared, but I felt like we were able to talk about some really important things today. And I'm all about a good laugh, and I'm all about seeing good in people too. So sometimes it can't always be deep. And so I'm glad that we were able to have just some good lightness in our conversation as we're talking about some powerful things.
great.
So
All right.
thank you for your time. Thank you for making the space, and everyone in the chat is just saying thank you so much, and we wish you well and success with the next book project, all the things that you're pregnant with. I wish you much success and blessings with it.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Nice talking to you. And y'all. See B. See y'all later. Thanks a lot. Take care.
All right,
All
thank you.
right. Bye.
Bye bye. Wow, what an incredible ride we just went on with another great member of the Leapcast community. I appreciate you listening and hope you got some tangible value from the episode. Please let us know what you think by leaving a comment, rating, and review. As always, please don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. This is Dr. George James, and I'll see you next time.